Good evening. Tonight we open 5 files, so vicious Netflix wouldn't touch them. A motel mattress, slit open, packed with a ledger of dried blood dates and victims' initials. A kill record hidden in the bed. A chest freezer running hard in July. Wrapped human remains stacked like groceries. A cassette labeled "Do Not Dub." A recording of a victim's last breaths, counted, controlled, and cut off. An ambulance log filled with names of people who never reached any hospital, run by predators using a fake rig to collect victims. And a spotless garage, pressure washed, lemon scented, where the floor drain still carries faint blood stains. A room made for killing and cleaning. Before we dive in, hit like, tap subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Quick content note. These are fictionalized true crime narratives for clarity and respect. Names, places, and timelines are altered, but the emotions echo real cases. Ready? Story 1. The Manifesto in the Mattress. The guard gave him a pencil because he looked bored, not because he looked dangerous. In Leveson Federal Penitentiary, boredom was the one thing nobody could contraband. Cal Ransom rolled the cedar yellow pencil between his fingers as if testing the weight of a weapon, then leaned over a stack of loose paper and began with a sentence that could have been an epitaph. I hate you all. Not you personally, you plural, mankind, governments, churches, reform schools, the men who ran them, and the boys who survived them. Cal's letters bloomed into paragraphs, then into pages that sounded nothing like pleas. He didn't ask for mercy. He didn't claim madness. He wrote like an auditor closing a hateful ledger. He had been born on a busted farm. Father walked out. Mother wore down. At 11, he was shipped to a reform school that called itself a home. Cal called it a basement with straps soaked in brine. In his telling, whatever was human in him curled up there and stopped trying. If you believed him, the school didn't educate. It manufactured resentment and stamped it with a Bible verse. By 15, he was jumping boxcars, drinking from tin cups, and stealing because taking felt better than asking. He learned a magic trick. If you never stayed long enough to be known, no one would notice you go. A different name in each town, a different smile, a different lie. Then a riot of escalation. He broke into a politician's summer house, the fat one with the portrait, and found cash in a desk and a revolver in a shoebox. The cash he used to buy a used sailboat, paint flaking from the rails, a motor that coughed to life only when kicked. The gun he tucked into his waistband like an omen. He called the boat Pilgrim because he was the kind of man who liked words that sounded holy while doing things that weren't. He docked along the East Coast and offered odd jobs to anyone who needed a bunk for a night. Help tie off. I'll pay you in the morning. Morning never came. The harbor police logged disappearances with the time-honored notes. Transient, drunk, jumped bail, wrong crowd. Cal drifted on, a rumor with a rope. Sometimes he slipped south. Sometimes he slipped farther. Mexico, then a shuddering cargo ship to a coast in Africa where foreigners were above paperwork and nobody asked questions when hired men didn't come back from the bush. In Cal's version, he shot 6 of them just to see whether the world would stop him if he aimed far enough from the courthouse. It didn't. He wrote about arson like some people write about first love. A refinery at night, A ribbon of fire curling up a ladder, the shouts, the sirens, the color of panic. He liked the kind of crime that looked like bad luck on paper. He never took souvenirs. He took satisfaction. If a town called it an accident in the morning edition, he felt affirmed. Arrests came like weather. Petty theft, vagrancy, assault. He learned to bend cell bars with a trick of leverage he'd read in a book and practiced on a bed frame. In one county, he sweet-talked the turnkey, stole his keys during a handshake, and was across the tracks before the man finished his smoke. Each escape reinforced a private theorem. Institutions existed to be mocked. When Leveson finally kept him, it wasn't for violence. It was for burglary with a name attached. He had gotten sloppy and stayed in a city long enough that someone remembered him from a fight. A young guard named Hayes treated him like a person. That wasn't mercy. It was curiosity. Hayes asked Cal to write what he'd done and why. "For your conscience," he said, sounding like a man who still believed paper could change people. Cal smirked, then obliged. The pages were viciously articulate. He didn't call his crimes needs. He called them choices that felt like arithmetic. He described assault the way some men describe hunting. "It was the only time I felt alive." He described murder with the flatness of a clerk. He was there. Running through it all, a theology of contempt. No God, no devil, just men pretending to be either. He estimated his number at 21, then wrote beneath it, "I could be wrong. I didn't count as carefully as you'd like." He made a joke, then didn't laugh on the page. When the pages reached the prosecutor's desk, there was jubilation followed by grief. Jubilation because here, finally, was a confession. Grief because a confession is not a roadmap. Cal hadn't buried bodies with care. He'd discarded them. He hadn't kept trophies. He'd kept going. For every line in the manifesto that could be verified, 3 could not. He might have invented. He might have embellished. But there was a dead boy found with a rock where a face should be, 30 miles from a bay where Pilgrim was moored that summer. There was a harbour ledger with a cash payment to sea ransom, the week a sunburned sailor vanished. There was a refinery insurance claim a month after Cal had written, "I finally did it." In his last year, he killed a man inside the prison in a fight that wasn't a fight. When offered an appeal, he tilted his head like someone was explaining the game he'd tired of. "Hurry it up," he told the warden before the hanging. "I could have done this myself." What do you do with a man who knew exactly what he was and set it down in ink? A monster born? A boy broken? A citizen who declared war on the word "we"? The guard who brought him paper delivers mail now, older and heavier. Sometimes he thinks about the moment the pencil crossed the first line. He wonders whether giving Cal the means to speak was a mistake. Then he remembers the mothers whose missing sons were drunks on a ledger until the pages turned them back into people. Audience question. When a killer writes the story first, cold, unrepentant and smart, do we treat the manuscript as a tool for justice or as a platform that risks glorifying him? Where's your line? Up next, a man who baked birthday cakes by day and drew a map of bodies by night. The pins were little X's. The plane was small. The woods were big. Story 2. X marks the snow. Anchorage always looks honest in the morning. There's something about the air, clean as a promise, cold enough to keep secrets brittle. Bobby Hale's bakery helped. The glass case crowded with eclairs, the cinnamon rolls rising like small planets. The man himself with a stutter that made sarcasm impossible, and apologies sound sincere. People liked Bobby. He had that sheepish competence that makes neighbors trust you with a spare key. He'd moved north and married quiet. He hunted in season and spoke fondly of his father's kneading hands and his mother's patient pies. He did not look like a man who owned a strip of gravel 200 miles west that a two-seater could land on. Cindy didn't look like a woman who could run on frost with one wrist cuffed and the other bleeding where steel had chafed skin raw. She exploded from a hanger like alarm itself, barefoot, gowned in panic, making a noise too high to be a scream and too low to be a siren. A pickup stopped because men in Alaska stop for things that move wrong. In the ER, under lights that made everything look clinical, she said, "He has a plane, and he has things, and he said no one would miss me." The nurse pressed gauze and pressed call. Detective Mara Kunuk had a desk that made interns think she was messy, and lieutenants think she was overworked, which was true. She'd chased kidnaps that ended in relief, and murders that ended in protest marches. She kept 2 files open for 3 years with names written in black marker that didn't get smudged because nobody touched them. Women found in gullies or under birch. Bones that didn't line up until dental impressions tried to. Cindy's details lodged in Mara's head like splinters. The mounted bearskin in a basement. The smell of oil. A stutter on the name Bob. Mara had interviewed a Bob once, Hale, Bakery, Community League. He'd donated cupcakes to a fundraiser for missing women, a detail so sharply ironic it felt like fiction, which is how true crime keeps hurting. Real people do the things characters only threaten. The first search was tidy and unhelpful. A court order gave Mara and 2 uniforms a walk through Hale's home that felt like trespassing on a postcard. The basement had a chest freezer big enough for a deer and a pegboard of tools hung with equal spacing. Like someone who hated chaos lived there. The only weapon in plain sight was a compound bow. The floor was clean enough to eat off. That was the problem. The tip that broke the ice wasn't a tip. It was a nail. Mara stared at the basement paneling after everyone else had stopped seeing it. 1 row of finishing nails had a head brighter than the rest. When she pried the board up, dust sighed and wood groaned like a throat. She slid her hand into the wall and felt paper. Maps, 3 of them. 2 road charts, and a folded aviation map with grease marks where fingers had pushed and unfolded it 100 times. On the aviation chart, small X's lay scattered like a constellation only one astronomer admired. 24. Someone had pressed hard enough to emboss the paper, like wanting to make the marks permanent. Fishing spots, Hale's attorney said later, so quickly you could hear the rehearsals. My client fly fishes. Everyone does here. Everyone doesn't hide maps in walls, Mara said. So flat her partner exhaled like he'd been holding breath for a week. Search teams don't hike, they comb. The first X sat on a ridge beyond a river that braided itself into silver. Cadaver dogs circled, sat, and looked at handlers the way dogs do when they find the truth. They came back with bone that matched the shape of a human's patience. The second X gave a rib. The third, a tooth that made a dentist stoop and whisper, Oh. The press wanted a villain. They got a man in a borrowed blazer who blinked under flashbulbs like the light physically hurt him. Hale did not confess. He negotiated. He would point to X's in exchange for a sentence measured in years stacked like firewood instead of a needle. The DA stared past him to the mothers behind the glass and did the math that neither extreme wanted. Jurisdictional fights, weather forecasts, the cost of never finding what the map might hold. In the interviews, Hale spoke in 2 registers. In one, the stutter made him look breakable. In the other, the stutter disappeared. When he spoke about the woods, he said he liked the quiet out there. He said people were better when they were small shapes moving through spruce. He said he'd let them run to give them a chance. The court reporter lost her place for a second and had to be reminded to keep typing. He never used the word hunt. He never used the word kill. He said, did it, and it happened. The sort of grammar that can make a courtroom throw up its hands. Mara didn't. She put the map on an easel and tapped X's with a pencil, while families held each other or couldn't hold anything, and media people panned their cameras slow for drama. We think these are women whose names we know, she said. We also think these include women whose names we never learned. We're going to change that. The summer of the digs felt like a punishment the state deserved. Teams went out with shovels and came back with trash bags they carried, like they were walking behind small coffins. They found earrings that didn't belong to wives. They found plastic cuffs in a puddle that froze and thawed and froze. They found a ring that a mother recognized by the scratch across the setting from a day when her daughter had dropped a box on a moving day and laughed about adding character. Hale's defense tried to make Cindy small. She was 17, a sex worker, a runaway, a story with edges people decide they can ignore so their mornings feel clean. Mara gave Cindy structure. She got her witness counseling and coffee before depositions, and she ended every meeting with the sentence, "You matter." It sounded like a cliche until Cindy cried because no one had said it out loud in years. The plea came down like cold rain. Howell traded the rest of the map and admissions that closed composite cases for a sentence that outlived him. He never said why, because men like him don't have whys they recognize as reasons. He said words about rejection and anger, and they wouldn't have been missed. A sentence that made the judge look at the state seal instead of the defendant, so he wouldn't say something he'd be quoted for. Anchorage changed because places can, if people are embarrassed enough. The city funded a registry for traveling dancers, and hotel desk managers learned to call an outreach worker when someone didn't check out, instead of letting a housekeeper empty a trash can with a single earring inside it. The police department cross-trained vice and missing persons, so the words lifestyle and choices stopped ending conversations. The bakery closed for a while and reopened with new owners, and a wall of photos of women smiling because memory deserves to smile sometimes. Cindy moved to a town with 1 stoplight and 5 dogs. She works mornings and sleeps well some nights. She answered one letter from a reporter with a sentence that should be posted in every precinct lunchroom. He picked girls he thought would be forgotten. My job is not to let him be right. Hale's map sits in an evidence vault, but copies hang in places where social workers drink too much coffee. Each X has a name next to it in pencil now, and those pencils get replaced when they dull. If you go to the overlook above the first dig site at the right hour in August, the light goes gold in a way that makes everything look gentler than it was. There are small stacks of stones there now, one for each woman they brought home. It's not enough. It shouldn't be. It's what they have. Audience question. Predators gamble on society's indifference to certain victims. What specific policy, funding, protocol, or tech would most quickly collapse that house edge where you live? Next, a city where the neon glows over cardboard beds. A quiet man with a coat 2 sizes too big and a series of circles drawn around the dead. Story 3. The river takes what it's owed. They called it the Paper City because the mills along the water once printed everything. News, checks, bills, the thin pages of Bibles and phone books. Now the mills were condos with exposed brick and Edison bulbs. And the river that powered a century of ink had a new reputation. It kept secrets. The first time Detective Mara Finn stood on Dockline Promenade at 5 a.m., the fog came in so thick she could taste it. Out on the slow black water, a towboat horn moaned, and the bridge lights blinked amber. Behind her, college banners flapped above bars with chalkboard signs that still advertised last night's drink specials. She zipped her parka and stared at a phone that wasn't supposed to be there. "Third one this semester," Officer Rios said, pointing to the ping plotted on the map. Same pattern. Friday night. Walk out. Disappear between cameras. Phone pings from midstream for 10 minutes. Then nothing. Mara knelt. The promenade's cameras watched everything except the space between the last lamppost and the shadow of the willow trees. 10 yards where faces turned to static, where a river could swallow footsteps. On paper, it looked like drink, bad choices, cold water. On paper, it looked like an accident. On paper, Mara murmured, people die. In real life, they get helped. Rios glanced at her. Helped? Into a river? Helped, she repeated, tasting the word. The missing this time was Ezra Dane, 21, engineering student, joked too loudly, smiled too easily, walked through 3 camera fields at 1:41 a.m., waved at someone off-frame at 1:42, and then the air ate him. His roommate said he texted at 1:54, "Uber's a ghost lol," followed by a photo of the river, black and shining, a speck of bridge light warped like a tear. By 2:03, his phone sat somewhere between the South Pier and the mooring barge, blinking to a mast that couldn't see faces, only coordinates. Then it went black. The campus did what campuses do. Candles, flyers, a vigil in the quad where a freshman cried into a microphone and the dean said resilience, and the student paper asked, again, why the city wouldn't install more cameras. Mara sat with Ezra's mother on a bench above the promenade and let her talk until the words emptied out. Later, in the squad room, she made a list, 5 names in 2 years, all male, all in the same 6-week window between midterms and finals, all last seen between the same 2 bars on Dockline. It didn't make sense as a serial killer story, the TV kind. It wasn't ritual, it wasn't precise, it was sloppy and cruel, and it looked like bad luck. It looked like water. So she went to the river. You learn a city by the places where people don't go during daylight. The underbridge, the backside of the boathouse, where the dockhands clatter oarlocks at dawn and ignore you if you ignore them. The maintenance alley behind the fancy condos, where a janitor smokes next to a grey door that opens into nowhere. Mara learned to time the towboats, to count the pulses of the current around the pylons, to feel the thrum of the turbines through the soles of her boots. She watched people who watched no one. A man in a parka who always leaned on the same railing. Another with a stiff gait who never crossed at lights. A woman with a dog that never sniffed. Patterns aren't always what repeats. Sometimes they are holes. The hole in Dockline's camera grid was 10 yards of willow shadow. The city's inspector told her the tree was too historic to cut. The condo board said the camera had been on back order for months. The bar owner shrugged. We've asked. It's the city. You know. At 1:15 a.m. on a raw Friday, Mara stood 2 lampposts up from the willow and watched people pour out of the mahogany fox. Straight couples leaned into cabs. 2 girls argued with happy voices. A man in a ball cap stood with his back to the river, not watching the door, not watching his phone, watching the space between the last lamppost and the willow shadow. He had the air of someone waiting for a bus he knew would come because it always did. When Ezra's roommate stumbled out and waved at nothing, the man's head tilted. The roommate turned right toward the taco truck, and the man in the cap did not move. Mara followed him anyway. He walked to the end of the promenade, checked the dark water as if counting, then crossed to the maintenance alley behind the condos. He had a badge clipped to his belt. Not city, not campus. Private. He knocked on a grey door. It opened from inside and swallowed him. The door was unmarked. Not a bar, not a residence, not public. She buzzed it. No answer. She waited, watching the alley cameras spill their greenish light, and when the grey door opened again, she slipped her boot into the gap. The man in the cap looked down at it and smiled without humour. "Can I help you, detective?" "Let me in," she said. He stepped sideways, a careful dance to block the hallway beyond with his body. "This is a private resident facility." "Which one?" "Condos," he said. "Utilities, boiler, nothing to see." "What's downstairs?" Mara asked. "Foundations," he said. "And upstairs?" He didn't answer. He closed the door. She took her boot back before it broke. She could have gone for a warrant. She could have waited. Instead, she walked to the river because sometimes you can't fight a city's paperwork. You have to listen to its water. At the mooring barge, a ladder climbed down to a maintenance platform slick with algae. The river moved slow enough to look harmless, fast enough to take you 5 yards while you blinked. The platform led to a steel box built into the dock, padlocked and painted city grey. A stenciled label said AUX pump. She shone a light through the slats and saw something she hated. Clean concrete, newer than the rest, and a drain that didn't line up with any official blueprint she'd ever seen. She found the inlet 30 feet away, a mouth in the river wall below the willow line where water eddied differently, where leaves spun inward. She tossed in a stick. It vanished. Rios handed her a file that afternoon. "I pulled the condo permits," he said. 10 years ago when they converted the mill. The mechanical layouts are a mess. But look at this. A variance for separate private pumping to maintain groundwater stability. Groundwater, Mara repeated. Or something else. You think they're sucking the river? Rios asked, wincing at his words. Mara rubbed her eyes. I think there's a private pump in a public river, and I think someone knows exactly how the current changes when it kicks on. If you want a body to go under a camera, you push him here. If you want a phone to drift before it dies, you wait until the pump cycles and toss it in. Who's you? Rios asked. Someone who works here. Someone who knows the cycles. They put a BOLO on the man in the cap and came up with a name. Grant Mullen, 43, facility tech for the Dockline Residences, former mill worker, no priors, divorce, son out of state, paid on time, taxes fine. The kind of man who lived in the spaces between official things because that's where his job always was. Mara didn't arrest him. She applied pressure elsewhere. City inspectors at his door, letters to the board, a quiet rumor to a reporter who liked to ask how much a condo association would spend to keep old secrets buried under new hardwood. By the time the inspection date landed, the promenade had another missing boy. Same cameras, same fog, same hole under the willow. This time, the roommate said, he waved at someone. A maintenance guy. I think he said something like, "Hey man, I remember you." From where? Mara asked. From move-in day, maybe. He helped carry our couch. Grant Mullen opened the grey door for the inspectors with polite boredom. He showed them the boilers, the chilled water, the beautifully balanced pumps. He stood beside Mara when they pried up the lid on the auxiliary pump and peered into the clean square of concrete and pipes. Flood control, he said. For the river, Mara asked. For the garages, he said. What about the intake pipe behind the willow? Grant blinked. What about it? Who runs it? He spread his hands. Ask the city. Better question, Mara said softly. When does it run? He smiled. When it needs to. She could have snapped cuffs right then. It would have felt good. Cinematic. It also would have failed. She didn't want an arrest that made the condo board a villain and turned Grant into a martyr. She wanted a confession even a river couldn't scrub. So she said, "Walk with me." They stepped out onto the promenade into a fog so thick the bridge was only 4 or 5 lights floating in a blank sky. She stopped at the willow's shadow. Right here, she said. This is the spot you like. He didn't answer. Not to kill, she said quickly. I'm not saying that. I'm saying routine. The same way a mill worker knows when machines will sing. A maintenance man knows when the river will pull. Grant's face didn't move. For a second, Mara thought she was wrong. Then he said something so quiet she almost missed it. You can hear it, he said, when it's about to turn. The pump. The water, he said. The way it talks when there's pressure built up. When it wants to go. Ezra Dane, Mara said. You were here. Grant looked at the river. I see a lot of kids make bad choices, he said. I see them stand right on this edge and tell themselves they're safe because the city built a railing. And you help them, Mara said. He didn't flinch. He didn't nod. He only said, I keep things running. Like the river, she said. Like the city, he said. You think it doesn't take maintenance to keep a place from drowning? Ask your budget people. Ask your inspectors. They want dry basements and pretty promenades. They want their paper city story. You know what stories are made of? Paper mills, pumps, people like me. And bodies, Mara said. He met her eyes. The river takes what is owed, he said simply. The confession, if it was one, didn't fit in any box. It didn't describe hands on shoulders or a push in the dark. It described a philosophy. It described a man who believed he wasn't hurting anyone because the river was going to ask for blood with or without him. That's not proof. It's a poem. Prosecutors don't take poems to trial. So Mara took something else. She filed a safety injunction to shutter the private pump until the city could certify its intake. The condo board screamed. The newspapers loved it. The promenade cameras were replaced in a week. The willow got trimmed because history mattered less when donors complained. And on the third Friday after Ezra's phone blinked from midstream, Mara stood in the fog again and listened for the water to talk. It didn't. By 2 a.m., the only thing moving was a towboat and a raccoon with a French fry. By 2:30, a group of seniors sang a terrible song and stumbled into a rideshare. By 3, the river was flat as a lie. No one disappeared. No phone pinged from midstream. A week later, Ezra's body surfaced 60 miles downriver and a bend where driftwood collects. There were no marks, no evidence, just lungs, water, and time. An accident, the report said. The coroner used phrases like post-mortem interval and immersion. The family buried their son. The dean sent an email about counseling. Mara watched Grant pack a cardboard box in his tiny office under the condos. The board had cut him loose until the legal dust settles, and he accepted it the way a man who works in maintenance learns to accept all weather. "You won't stop it," he said conversationally, as if discussing a leak. "You cut the intake and the current changes. The river finds another seam in the city. Someone else listens for the moment when the edge between safe and gone sounds like a note only they can hear. That's what people do. We listen for edges." She wanted to say something noble. She wanted to save him or damn him with words that would make a river behave. Instead, she said, "Don't come back to the promenade." He nodded, noted. He walked out into a fog so thin you could see the bridge lights clearly. Spring came. The students graduated. The city cut a ribbon on a new camera with a mayor who said partnership a lot. People told each other the story of how detectives solved the river disappearances with paperwork, not guns. They liked that story. The paper city wrote it down. But sometimes, at 1:42 a.m., a man still walked out of a bar and turned left toward the taxi stand, and the cameras caught him safely getting into a car, and everything ended the way it was supposed to. Other times, a phone pinged from the middle of the river. Not here, not dockline, upstream, downstream. The river takes what it's owed, people said. They said it quietly. They didn't say it near the willow. Question for you. If you were Mara, would you rather slam cuffs on a guy you can't quite prove, or change the city so the pattern starves? Which one feels like justice to you? Story 4 starts in 5 seconds. Ready? Story 4. Vacancy 1313. Hook first. A 911 call comes from room 1313 of the Bellwether Hotel. The dispatcher tries to log it, but the bellwether has only 12 floors. This hotel knew how to rot beautifully. The lobby still wore its scarred marble like a trophy, and the chandelier held so much dust it looked frosted. The elevators, however, were mean. When they opened, they exhaled a smell like wet carpet and old perfume, and the mirrored panels made you see yourself 10 times, present, past, mistakes. That was the bellwether's trick. It made you see yourself. Jules' heart checked in on a Sunday night with 2 suitcases and a face her viewers knew. She hosted a late-night cable show about haunted places and historical crimes, a sincere traveller in a genre full of jump scares. The bellwether wasn't on her schedule. It was a detour because a woman named Dolores had emailed her 2 weeks earlier with the kind of subject line you don't ignore. My sister called me from a floor that doesn't exist. Jules sat on the edge of the lobby sofa while the night clerk printed out the waiver you sign when a hotel knows its elevators stick and its windows whistle in the wind. "We're renovating," he said. "You've been renovating since 1998, Jules said gently. He smiled like it wasn't his fault. "What's the show called again?" "Crossing Midnight," she said. "We're not filming. I'm just here to look." "We get a lot of lookers," he said. He slid a key card across the marble. "You're in 912. The good elevator is on the right." "The good elevator?" she asked. "The one that usually stops where you ask it to," he said. At 1:07 a.m., when hotel carpets leaned toward ghost stories, Jules set her phone to record and clicked play on the 911 audio Dolores had sent. "Dispatcher, 911. What's your emergency?" Female caller, breathless. "I am in room 1313. He has a key." Dispatcher, "Mom, can you confirm your location?" Caller, the bellwether. I think he works here." Dispatcher, "Mom, the bellwether has 12 floors." Caller, "He said the elevator pretends. Please, he's coming." A metallic bang. The line goes dead. Dolores's email said her sister Carmen had disappeared 2 years earlier while traveling for a regional real estate convention. The cops shrugged at first, then shrugged harder when they found credit card use 1 state over. But Dolores didn't shrug. She got the 911 audio through a friend, then listened to it every night like a prayer. She didn't believe Carmen left. She believed the elevator pretended. Jules took the good elevator to 12 and watched the numbers climb. When the door slid open, she stepped into a hallway that smelled like old ice machines. The carpet was a pattern of diamonds, worn flat. The ceiling tiles sagged gently, like people who worked too many double shifts. At the far end of the corridor, a service door stood ajar. She walked to it, recording. Inside, a short flight of stairs rose to a locked metal door with a stenciled warning, "Maintenance only." She put her ear to the metal and heard humming. Not electrical, musical. Someone singing under their breath, a rhythm you use when counting. She went back down and knocked on 1209. A housekeeper in scrubs cracked it. "Yes." Jules smiled. "I'm looking for the 13th floor." The woman's mouth twitched. "Aren't we all?" "The elevator pretends," Jules said softly. Something like fear darted behind the woman's eyes and disappeared. "We don't talk about that," she said. and shut the door. At 2:18 a.m., the elevator that wasn't good juddered to a stop and sighed. The buttons glowed 1 through 12. No hidden trick, no extra keyhole labeled 13. But there was a place where button 15 should have been if this were a different building. A smooth piece of plastic that looked like every other part of the panel, but felt subtly wrong under Jules's fingertip. Colder, newer. She pressed it. The elevator didn't move. It only made a sound like a small decision happening. Then the panel lights dimmed and came back, and the number over the door went blank. The cab moved, not up, not down, sideways. It felt like being pulled up under your ribs by a hand that didn't know it was holding you. When the doors opened, the hallway lights hummed at a different pitch. The carpet pattern had changed from diamonds to L shapes, woven into a maze you could get lost in if you let your eyes wander. The air smelled like fresh paint and something metallic. A black plaque said 1301 to 1316. Jules stood very still and thought, this is how people disappear. They follow something they think will save them. An email, a rumor, a sister's voice, and then a door opens that shouldn't. They step in. They don't step back. She stepped in. Room 1309's door had a nick in the wood, as if someone tried to pry it open with a coin. 1311's peephole was stuffed with tissue. 1313 didn't look special. It looked like a door. She put her ear to it and heard air moving in an enclosed space, and under that, a sound she didn't like. A soft scrape, like something plastic dragging across carpet. She knocked. Silence. She knocked again, lightly. Footsteps, not to the door. Away from it, into the room, toward the far wall, then back with something different in their rhythm. The sound of a person moving while carrying an object with care. The lock turned once. The door chain stayed in place. The door opened 2 inches. A man's face appeared, pale and round and damp, as if he'd fallen asleep in a sauna. He wore a maintenance polo with a bellwether logo sewn crooked on the chest. "We're closed," he said. "For what?" Jules asked. "Renovations," he said. His eyes flicked to her phone. No filming. "I'm not filming," she lied. "I got off on the wrong floor." "There is no 13th floor," he said. "Right," she said. "Exactly." He hesitated. That was how the bellwether caught people. It presented you with an absurdity so bland you kept talking just to hear yourself again. "I won't tell if you won't," she said. He considered, then shut the door 2 inches, unhooked the chain, and opened it 6. The room smelled like orange cleaner and something copper sweet that made Jules want to sit down. He stepped aside to block her view, and she saw, over his shoulder, a roll of thick plastic sheeting and a heap of objects on the bed under a floral spread. A stack of license lanyards, a scatter of cheap keychains, a hairbrush, a silver ring on a hotel notepad. "Working late?" she asked, voice steady. He smiled. "Always." "What's your name?" she asked. "Brett," he said. "How long have you been working the 13th floor that doesn't exist, Brett?" His eyes didn't change. "Long enough to know when the elevator pretends." "Carmen," she said. "Does that name mean anything to you?" His gaze flicked to the bed. One quick, traitorous glance that showed Jules a hotel card embossed with a name, Seemarin. Then his smile came back. "You're not supposed to be here," he said. "That makes two of us," Jules said. She heard it then, under the hum, under the hotel's tired breath, the tiniest sound a person can make when they are trying very hard to make no sound at all. A breath held too long in someone else's room. "Is someone here?" Jules asked, leaning to see past him. He stepped forward to block her view. The door touched her sleeve. "We're closed," he said again. Jules did not reach for the chain. She did not push. She did the thing that keeps you alive in the building that eats you if you challenge it. She smiled, nodded like she was the one making a mistake, and took 2 steps backward. "Of course, sorry." He closed the door. The lock turned once. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding and walked, not ran, to the elevator. It came quickly. The panel had no 13. She pressed 12. It took her to 9. She rode to the lobby and walked straight out into the street where the air didn't hum, and called 911 from the curb. "Room 1313, the dispatcher repeated, bored and curious at once. "Yes," Jules said, "and send more than 1 unit. He has a key. He also has trophies." "Ma'am, please remain on the line," the dispatcher said dutifully. "We're contacting the property." When the patrol car rolled up, the night clerk paled and said, "There is no "Show us the maintenance stair," Jules said. He hesitated just long enough to tell her everything she needed to know. Then he led them to the service door at the end of the 12th floor corridor and up the short flight to the locked metal door. The officer knocked. No answer. He looked at the clerk. "Key." The clerk fumbled a ring and opened the door into a hall that looked like the rest, but wrong. Same carpet pattern as 12, but newer. Same wallpaper, but seam shifted, like the hotel had pressed a copy of it itself out of stale dough. The plaque said 1301 to 1316. The clerk swallowed and said, "I never come up here." "Who does?" Jules asked. "Maintenance," he said. "Brett sometimes." They walked to 1313. The door looked like a door because that's what predators do. They make everything look like everything else. The officer knocked. "Police." Silence. He knocked again. "Maintenance." The lock turned. The door swung inward. The room was empty and politely at rest. Bedspread smoothed. Curtains closed. A tray on the dresser with a domed lid that said "Bellwether Room Service" in old script. No plastic roll. No heap of lives. No man named Brett. But behind the bathroom door, under the sink, taped to the plywood back with blue painter's tape, a handful of room key sleeves rustled when the AC kicked on. Names in ballpoint ink, initials, dates. "Where is he?" the officer asked. "Everywhere," Jules said. "Rooms get cloned, floors get pretended. People who know hotels know how to be ghosts." They found more in 1311, more in 1307, a ring of keys in 1303, a nest of hotel pens in the ceiling tile above 1315. By the time the second patrol unit rolled up, the Bellwether had quietly unfolded its 13th floor like a guilty letter. It had always been here, in the seam between city permits and hotel budget lines, in the complacent place where an elevator panel's absence is as good as a locked door. They found Brett at 3:40 a.m., not on 13, but standing at the vending machine on 9, punching a 5 for chips with the calm of a man buying a soda. Jules watched him take a step back, wait for the bag to fall, then look up at her like they'd shared a cab to a funeral. "You called them," he said. "You called first," she said, 2 years ago. He looked genuinely puzzled. "Did I?" "Carmen," Jules said. "Room 1313. Something in his face tightened, then loosened as if a real memory tried to surface and a practice story drowned it. "I keep the floors that don't exist from collapsing," he said mildly. "I keep guests from seeing things they shouldn't." "And when a guest calls for help from a floor that doesn't exist?" Jules asked. He blinked. Then it didn't happen. The Bellwether's 13th floor closed a month later. The building put out a statement about safety and compliance. The night clerk found a job at a chain hotel with better lighting. Jules aired an episode that didn't name the city or the property. Dolores watched it in her living room and wept and thanked Jules, and also didn't forgive her because a show is not a sister. A year after that, a demolition crew tore out the service stair and the locked door and the entire hall that pretended not to exist. The elevator panel stayed the same. No 13. But sometimes, if you rode it late and pressed the smooth place where a button could be, it hummed in a way that made your ribs feel like an unlocked door. Question for you: would you have stepped into 1313? Or would you have walked away and lived with the not knowing? Which one is braver? And which one is safe? Story 5 starts in 5 seconds. It's called Clean Hands. Story 5. Clean Hands. Cold open. A beloved philanthropist cuts the ribbon on a new children's wing, while 2 miles away, a storage unit leaks something that smells like bleach. His foundation slogan is painted on both doors: "Clean hands, clean future." When the city wants a hero, it makes one. It takes a person with a talent for smiling and a tolerance for small talk and drapes them with words like visionary and steward. It prints their face on billboards. It gives them a key shaped like a skyline. And if you're not careful, it lets that hero do anything they want, because heroes save cities, and cities are very tired. Nathaniel Wilde didn't look like a villain or a savior. He looked like a dentist from an upscale suburb. Silvering hair, careful shoulders. A suit that looked expensive because it wasn't expensive at all. It was perfect. His foundation, Clean Hands, started as a crisis response non-profit that put hand-washing stations on corners during an outbreak, then kept going when the cameras left. Modular sinks outside shelters, hygiene kits in schools, portable showers that rolled into vacant lots when heat made humans smell like desperation and dignity. Journalists loved him. Donors loved him. The city council named a day after him. Detective Kira Lott didn't love him. She didn't hate him. She didn't know him, and that was the point. She only knew the smell that rolled out of Storage Max Unit B 117 when the manager pried the lock with a bolt cutter because the account had lapsed. It wasn't the sweetish reek of rot. It was chemical. It was clean in a way that made you feel less clean. Inside the unit, 4 stainless steel tables like you'd find in a hospital, 3 industrial-sized bottles of bleach, a wet vac, a stack of folded tarps, and a rolling rack hung with coveralls in sizes S to XL. On a shelf, laminated placards with the Clean Hands logo. On the floor, a dry line of whitish residue that traced a neat rectangle, like tape marks on a stage. "Who rented this?" Kira asked. The manager pointed at the contract. "Shell Company." But the card, Clean Hands Foundation. Kira took pictures and made a quiet call. The city loved clean hands. If this was nothing, no one needed to know. If it wasn't... "You think he's washing money?" her captain asked, trying for a joke and missing. "I think he's washing something," she said. Wilde met her in a glass conference room with a view of the Foundation's warehouse, where a dozen workers were packing hygiene kits. He glowed with the kind of cleanliness you can't fake. "We rent storage all over the city," he said. "We stage equipment for deployments, bleach, tarps. That's what response looks like." "And the stainless tables?" Kira asked. He smiled, patient. "We do pop-up wound care clinics, not medical, first aid. You'd be amazed how many people will come for a Band-Aid and leave with the case manager." The story fit. It fit so well, it almost creaked. Kira walked the warehouse, counted sinks, asked names. Everyone said Mr. Wilde worked harder than any donor they'd ever met. He stayed late. He drove supply trucks himself. He showed up when no one else did. He took pictures only when it helped the mission. 3 days later, a sanitation crew called in a code 2 for a hazmat concern at the edge of the Mill Creek encampment. Kira pulled up to find a Clean Hands shower trailer parked crooked, the hose dribbling. A volunteer named Jess paced with a clipboard. "We shut it down when the water went cloudy," she said. "Cloudy how?" Kira asked. "Like someone dumped a bottle of sanitizer into the tank," Jess said. "Except we don't use that stuff in the lines. It messes up the filtration. Mr. Wilde said the city changed the water supply and not to worry." "Where is Mr. Wilde?" Kira asked. "Donor lunch," Jess said. "He said to move the trailer to the north lot and flush it." "Don't move anything," Kira said. She crawled under the trailer with a flashlight and found a hairline crack in the grey water tank patched with tape. The tape had peeled. The leak had turned the ground into a chalky paste that looked like melted soap, but smelled like a hospital supply closet. "Bleach?" Rios asked, crouching beside her. "That's not bleach," Kira said. "It's too sweet." They traced the trailer's route for the past month and mapped it against a cluster of deaths that had whispered through the corners of Kira's caseload like mice. 5 people, living rough, all found within a few blocks of where the trailer had parked. Cods varied: overdose, exposure, natural. None screamed homicide because death doesn't scream when it sits down quietly in a place the city doesn't see. Patterns again, or holes. Kira pulled autopsy tog screens. 3 of the 5 showed trace amounts of chlorhexidine, an antiseptic used in surgical scrubs and deep clean disinfectants. Tiny amounts, not enough to kill anyone. Except, what if someone with compromised skin integrity, infections, wounds, got doused with solution at concentrations meant for countertops, not people? She thought of the stainless tables, the tarps, the slogan, "Clean hands, clean future." "Wilde's not stupid," her captain said when she pitched a warrant. "If he's sloppy with chemicals, it's negligence at worst." "Negligence kills people," Kira snapped. "Prove it," he said. She went back to Storage Max in the rain and stood in Unit B117, with her hands in her coat pockets, listening to the quiet hum of a building that held some people's Christmas decorations and other people's entire lives. She pictured a pop-up clinic in this exact rectangle, tarps taped to the floor to catch drips, tables lined with wound wash and good intentions. She pictured a donor photo in a newsletter and a man who liked to be needed a little too much. Wilde called her the next morning as if she were a friend. "We're deploying to the South Lot at noon. I'd love to show you how we work." "Donor lunch cancelled?" she asked. He laughed. Donors love being useful. She arrived to find the trailer gleaming, hose lines neatly coiled. Wilde wore jeans and a clean hands hoodie. He gave a small tour for a group of people who smelled like office coffee. "Every kit is a conversation starter," he said. "A way to build trust." "Trust you to do what?" Kira asked. "To show up," he said warmly. "Even when the cameras aren't here." "Especially then," he said. He was good. He was so good it made her angry, because people needed sinks and someone who said their names on purpose. He was a story the city wanted to be true. She followed the hose line to the grey water tank and saw the tape patch had been replaced with a proper fix. The leak had stopped. The smell hadn't. She set a sample jar under the outflow and watched water drip. Clear, then faintly cloudy, then clear again as the pump cycled. "Something in your lines," she said conversationally. "Soap," he said. "Not the kind you use on hands," she said. His eyes were kind and blank. "I leave that to my ops team." "Storage Unit B117, she said softly. "You or ops?" "A beat. We lease dozens of units." "What do you do on those tables?" she asked. "Clean the future," he said, and smiled because that line always worked. She could have made a scene. She didn't. She let the donors leave with warm feelings and let the trailer rumble off to its next position. Then she did something that felt useless and turned out to be a lever. She called a nurse who ran a street medicine team and asked her to teach a class. 2 days later, in a community center that smelled like dust and hope, 30 volunteers who wore clean hands t-shirts sat in folding chairs while a woman named Tasha held up a bottle of chlorhexidine and said, "This is not for skin at this dilution. This is for countertops. If you use this in the shower line because it makes donors feel like we're blasting germs, you will burn people." A young volunteer raised a hand shaky. Mr. Wilde said, "Mr. Wilde is not a nurse," Tasha said calmly, "and you need to stop worshipping men with clipboards." The clipboards flushed. A few people left. Most didn't. They wanted to do it right. They had been waiting for permission to say out loud the thing their instincts already knew. Wilde called Kira that night. His voice was cooler. "You're undermining my work." "I'm saving it," she said. "You can either learn or get sued." "You have no idea how hard this is," he said. And there it was, the strain in the voice of a man who believed the city would die without him. "You're right," she said. "I don't know what it's like to be on a stage while my volunteers burn people with the wrong chemical because I didn't train them." Silence. Then, "We need to meet." She met him at the warehouse after closing. The lights made the place look like a clean garage. He stood with his back to a pallet of boxed soaps and stared at the big printed mission statement on the wall. "You think I'm a monster," he said softly. "I think you like being necessary," she said. "I am necessary," he said with unbearable sincerity. "When the city closes showers, when shelters overflow, when public health says it's out of our hands, it's in my hands." "Clean hands," she said. He closed his eyes. "I started this because no one else would. And then donors showed up. Do you know what donors like? Sparkle, before and after. They don't like slow, patient cleaning. They like a hose and a chemical that smells like something is dying. I gave them a smell." "And people got hurt," she said. He opened his eyes. "I can fix it," he said. "I can fix anything." "Nathaniel," she said, and used his first name not to be kind but to be exact. "What happened in Unit B117? He took a breath. "We did a pop-up wound clinic during the storm," he said. "The shelters were turning people away because of wet floors and liability. I couldn't let them get infected. We laid tarps. We cleaned feet. We used what we had. We scaled." "Scaled," she repeated. "I thought if we made it look professional, it would become professional," he said. "If we had tables, it would turn into a clinic. If we had bleach, it would disinfect anything we did wrong. And the bodies," she said gently. "The 5 deaths near your sites." He flinched. "Coroner said exposure." "Coroner said a lot of things." He sagged. "I didn't kill anyone." "I didn't say you did," she said. "I'm saying you wanted to be a savior so badly that you didn't notice when you turned washing into damage." He stared at her like she'd turned into a wall he couldn't find a key for. "What do you want?" "Shut the unit," she said. "Shut the 13th floor of your foundation. Get licensed clinicians. Train your people. Admit in writing that you used an agent at the wrong dilution and pay for wound care for those you burned. And if you ever tape a tarp to a storage unit floor again, I will find the code section that makes it a crime and I will carve it on your door." He smiled then, small and bitter. "You think that will save anyone?" "I think it will keep you from making more holes," she said. He did it, not because he was noble, because the donors called, because the nurse's training turned into a story, because the word negligence began to whisper near the foundation's name. He shut B117. He hired clinicians. He dulled the sparkle. The city muttered and moved on, because cities need their heroes, even when they are scuffed. Months later, in a quiet moment at a pop-up that smelled like real soap and not death, the young volunteer who'd raised her shaky hand handed Kira a folded piece of paper. Inside, a photo of a man whose feet were clean and bandaged, looking into a camera like someone had said his name gently. "We started writing down the names," the volunteer said, "so they can't be holes." Kira nodded and tucked the paper into her pocket like a receipt for the only currency that matters. Question for you. In a city that runs on good PR, would you take down a beloved foundation to stop a quiet harm? Or try to reform it from the inside and risk being used for optics? Where's your line?
Case closed. Archived in the synthetic vault. If you dare to return, the next file awaits. truecrime.exe. The line between fiction and fear.